When I think of summer, I think sunshine, I think tropical drinks, I think being out by the beach. So I decided to work on a Tiki dress. For this pattern specifically, I used a pattern from Gertie's new book for better sewing, which I've owned for a couple years, and it's great. It's super vintage inspired, and the pattern really went well with this fabric that I bought not too long ago. The fabric is so vibrant and it's so loud, and I knew that it had to be a super fun dress. So for this bodice on this particular dress, it does have a ruched center front, which with no dart. So the front of the bodice is a little bit different that you might normally see. For this project, there's also the use of elastic thread in the back, which I'd actually never used before. This was the first time that I used it with my machine. And so it was really interesting to see how much the fabric would shrink as I was sewing the back panels, and seeing how much smaller that panel became as I added more and more rows of stitching down the back. The hardest part about doing the elastic thread was actually not the sewing part itself, but rather trying to get the panels to fit on the back, because I vastly underestimated the amount of shrinkage that would happen as I was sewing. I think future iterations will have some sort of measurements taken earlier on. Also, in a detail in the front is actually this sort of bias band that crisscrosses across the front. So these were redrafted from a pattern piece inside the book, which was pretty cool because, you know, the book really gives a lot of tutorials and a lot of instruction on how to draft pattern pieces yourself. So it was a nice little review, considering that I've actually made the bodice top before on a different project. It was nice to be able to bring that technique back and give this nice little visual interest across the front. Now, this particular pattern actually called for boning along the center front and the side seams, which I actually had to omit because I did not receive the shipment in on time. There was actually a lot of notching that also had to take place, considering the curve across the bodice top. And there's also a bunch of understitching to make sure that it won't roll over, the lining won't show as you're wearing the garment. Now, once the underlining, once the lining is placed properly, the underlining itself is actually pretty easy to do. Super important technique, so don't skip this step. Now, the ruching across the top is actually done by hand, which is pretty difficult. I definitely recommend using a thimble as you work to be able to drive the needle through all those different layers. Definitely use some basting stitches before you start trying to tack it down permanently, and do several lines of that. Now, when it comes to the skirt of the pattern, it did not come with a kick pleat, which to me is actually super important. I think it gives it a kind of a different look. Originally, the pattern called for a straight slit down the back, which does look nice, but it's not my favorite. So I actually wrote a tutorial not too long ago on my website about drafting and sewing a kick pleat, which I drafted onto the skirt pieces that I used for this particular Tiki dress. It's really not that difficult to do. It looks really confusing at first, but it really adds so much ease of movement, and it's less likely to split as you're walking, which has happened to me before on other pieces. The skirt also uses a slash and spread technique, which gives it this pleating kind of gathering on the left hand side, which you can actually see when I'm wearing the garment.